All right. So it is Wednesday, April 22nd, and I'll call tonight's board meeting to order, recognizing that tonight's meeting is being held online on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw people, with people attending virtually from other territories, including Staminas and Snuneymuxw, as well as other territories. Before moving on to our agenda this evening, I'd like to acknowledge a few things that have been going on in various communities. First, I would like to just start by saying that typically at 7 o'clock, many of us would be in our backyards or on our front porches, maybe in the car honking the horn or banging some pots and making some noise to show our support for our essential workers. And so since we won't be able to do that this evening, I just would like to thank all of our essential workers on behalf of the board. I'd also like to acknowledge the recent tragedy that occurred in Nova Scotia and send our thoughts and hearts are going out to everyone who has suffered a loss and going through that traumatic situation. I would also like to acknowledge that today is Administrative Professionals Day. There are a very large number of administrative professionals in our district, and we just want to take this opportunity not only to acknowledge them, but all of our staff members who are giving their best efforts for students right now, and we are very, very grateful for that work. At the conclusion of our meeting in honor of Earth Day today, I hope that you'll take the time to consider how we can be more sustainable in general as people in looking after our Earth and being connected to the lands on which we live. And finally, I would like to welcome our new Secretary Treasurer, Mark Walsh, to School District 68. We're very excited to have you be a part of our team, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we have no transfer of items to the open meeting agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or change in order to the agenda? Seeing none, is there any objection to approving the agenda? Seeing no objection, the agenda is accepted and carried unanimously. Moving on to section 7, approval of the minutes. 7.1, that the Board of Education of School District 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, adopt the minutes from the regular board meeting, from the regular Board of Education meeting held on March 11th, 2020. Moved by Trustee Higginson, seconded by Trustee Berzovich. Is there any objection to approving the minutes? Seeing none, the minutes are carried unanimously. Moving on to section 8. 8.1, that the section 72.3 report from the special closed board meeting held on March 13th, 2020 be received. Can you get someone to move that? Moved by Trustee Stanley, seconded by Trustee Higginson. Is there any objection to approval? Seeing none, it's carried unanimously. 8.2, that the section 72.3 report from the special closed board meeting on March 27th, 2020 be received. It's moved by Trustee Barron, seconded by Trustee Stanley. Is there any objection to carrying? It's approved unanimously. 8.3, that the section 72.3 report from the special closed board meeting held on April 2nd be received. Moved by Trustee Stanley, second by Trustee Barron. Is there any objection to the approval? Seeing none, it carries unanimously. Just a reminder for everyone to mute your microphones, please. Moving on to section 8.4, that the section 72.3 report from the special closed board meeting held on April 16th, 2020 be received. Can I get a mover? Moved by Trustee Keller, seconded by Trustee O'Neill. Is there any objections to the approval? Seeing none, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Announcements and reminders. May 6th will be our Education Committee meeting held virtually at 6 p.m. May 13th, 2020 will be our Business Committee meeting at 6 p.m. also held virtually. On May 20th, we will also have a special business committee meeting at 6 p.m. And on May 27th, we'll be holding our regular board meeting at 6 p.m. We have no presentations this evening, so we're moving into our correspondence section of our agenda. 11.1. That the Board of Education of School District 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, receive and file the above correspondence from Minister Rob Fleming dated March 27th, 2020. If I get a mover. Moved by Trustee Keller, seconded by Trustee O'Neill. There's no objection to approving. That carries unanimously. We have no committee reports this month. Moving into senior staff reports. 13.1, Superintendent Scott Saywell and Deputy Superintendent Tim Davey.
Scott, your mic is muted.
Oh, I was profound. You missed it. Thank you. Through the chair. We're going to talk about the continuity of learning, our food programs, as well as our learning care centers. And I'll turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Davey in a second, but I just wanted to share some of my thoughts before we get there. We embarked on this after March break, of course, when the ministry suspended in-school instruction. What I'd like to do is recognize the high degree and pace of work that has happened during that time. We are doing some remarkable things that, again, Deputy Superintendent Davey is going to share. If you were ever unclear that we were doing more than just delivering curriculum in the school district, it's very clear now. The school is a development agent for the community, really the strength of our society, and one of the most important social determinants of health. We have stood up to this challenge that is COVID, and I'm proud to say that the school system has risen to that challenge. When the ministry suspended in-school instruction, they had 4 guiding principles: ensure a healthy and safe environment for all students, families, and employees, provide the services needed to support children of our essential workers, support vulnerable students who may need special assistance, and provide continuity of educational opportunities for all students. We have delivered on all 4 of those guiding principles, and I'm happy to say we've done it very well. Our teachers and support staff have jumped into this, and I'm incredibly impressed at what I'm seeing. Innovation and creativity are happening everywhere. With that, I will turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Davey to provide us with some of the numbers of what's happening out there.
Thank you, Superintendent Saywell. Through the chair, I'd just like to share with the board this evening a bit of information, and again, discussing continuity of learning updates, food program updates, and learning care center updates. What I would like to do, first of all, if you would indulge me for a moment, is just recognize the challenges that are faced globally, but certainly at a local level that are faced by many of our families across our community and districts. So I just want to put forward that acknowledgement, and then also echo the words of Superintendent Saywell of the fine work that employees and staff are doing during these times to support our families within our local communities here. So thank you, and I do applaud the efforts that are going forward. As the chair pointed out, our highest priority and highest regard goes to those essential service workers who are supporting our community at this time to make things work in a very difficult and challenging circumstance. So thank you to them. What I'll start off with is continuity of learning update, and within that, what I will share is that for the weeks during spring break, we had a number of staff members that were working diligently once the provincial mandate came forward around suspension of learning in the classroom environment, and doing a lot of work to prepare behind the scenes leading up to the end of spring break when staff came back. I'm very pleased to be able to share with the board that our staff through our schools and through our leadership of our instructional leaders, principals and vice principals, coordinators, that our staff, our teachers, our support staff have stepped up to the challenge, as the superintendent has pointed out. Continuity of learning in differing fashions is taking place across our district. And obviously, as a K-12 system, we have teachers that are stepping into this in different fashions. The full kickoff for the continuity of learning plans took place on Tuesday, April 14th, and the week prior to that was an opportunity for teachers to be connecting in with families and really ensuring the health and well-being of our students at this time. These personal connections continue, as well as updates for ways that families can best support their children and our students through their learning aspects as we're in this phase, as faced by the COVID pandemic here. I'm very happy to be able to share with the board that we are looking at many ways in which we can meet the needs for equity across our district. And within that, then, starting today, we have a rollout of technology from the district right into the hands of students that need that piece of technology to support their learning. And we had a rollout first day. It's continuing through Friday this week with families that have identified this need. And our distribution of Chromebooks at this time exceeds over 2,000 units that are going into the hands of students and supporting families. Moving forward, continuity of learning, again, is a priority for the Department of Learning Services, and we are continuing to work directly to support the phase while we're in a suspension of learning, and we're also entering into discussions, very preliminary nature right now, but entering into discussions in the event that there is a partial return to schooling for our students. I will move on to our food distribution program here, and I wish to acknowledge the work of our Executive Director for Communications, Joe Burgos, and the support that he has in terms of working with Crystal Dennison, the Executive Director for the Nanaimo Ladysmith Schools Foundation, and also recognize the work of many of our district staff and also many of our employees throughout the district. We have a large responsibility in terms of meeting the needs of students, not just in terms of their academic needs, but also their social and emotional well-being. And part of that includes making sure that students and families are fed and nourished so that they can be in a position to learn. Just to give you some numbers here, to date, we are looking at 900 students who have received hampers, and as pointed out to the board, these are hampers to support a family through the week. Some of those numbers are repeated students and families who are receiving hampers weekly. We have another rollout tomorrow where we will have distribution to another 110 families. And on Monday, work is underway preparing hampers for 95 additional families. So this work continues in great partnership with many of our community and district partners, as well as, again, the Nanaimo Ladies of Schools Foundation. So I'm very proud of this work and the support that we're providing for families there. In addition to that, it's my pleasure to be able to share with you, and this is a directive from the Ministry of Education in terms of supporting the children of essential service workers within our district and again across our communities that our district supports here. And we have to date 5 centers that are opened. We did receive in excess of 650 applications, 400 applications representing about 650 students. We have had contact with all of those families and made arrangements for care provisions for families within our schools. I am pleased to share with you that we have, in addition to the work that staff has been engaged in over the past few weeks to get these centers up and running, we have a number of employees that are connected into supporting, again, the children of essential service workers. We have assigned to sites. We have educational assistants assigned to sites, teachers, custodial support. We have clerical support assigned to sites, as well as administrators who are working in teams to support these centers and this great initiative. Our centers are open for 8 hours of the day, again, to support these families and the children of our essential service workers. And I will point out to the board that through the ministry guidelines, we've been able to determine, again, prioritizing families based on the essential service workers list. So just starting with the first site that we have 51 students attending. Site number 2, there are 40 students presently, with 3 additional students to be attending that site. And the second site is also recognized and supporting students who are enrolled in our French immersion programs. Third site that we opened, and again, as our district expands into our more direct communities, we do have a community in which we have 3 students attending the site and 6 on the pending list, so there will be 9 students attending this center. We have a 4th center where there are 15 students attending, and we just opened, actually started with our orientation yesterday and enrollment at the 5th site today with 16 students, and we anticipate that that number is going to continue to grow. In addition to that, I will make note that we have a 6th site that we anticipate is going to open early to mid week next week. And this site is identified in support of our students with high vulnerability needs. And specifically what we're looking at is supporting students from the district skills programs, life skills programs, and where we'll have an AM and PM group running in there. We are working through numbers at this point, and we are looking for ways that we can support families through transportation needs to this site. I think that is a high-level overview of the work that has been taking place over the last 5 weeks as we received announcement and the work that is taking place. The final thing that I will add to this is that these efforts are not standalone efforts. We're not working in silo as a department, but I will acknowledge the great efforts from various leaders and staff across all departments within our district. So thank you very much for that. And I'm open to taking any questions that may present themselves from trustees.
Great, thank you. Before we move to questions from trustees, Superintendent Sewell.
Yeah, something, thank you, through the chair. Something I forgot to say at the beginning. I did want to personally recognize our newest addition to our senior team, Secretary Treasurer Mark Walsh. Mark has a great deal of experience in school districts. Working with the Victoria School Board, he was both Secretary Treasurer there and headed up the HR department. And I wonder if we could turn it over to our new Secretary Treasurer just to welcome him, just for a brief moment.
Of course.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you very much, Superintendent. Can I just say what a marvelous school district I get to work for. Everyone has been so welcoming and friendly and open since my virtual arrival, I guess we will call it, in Nanaimo Ladysmith. And so I also just want to recognize the time that people took during the process, the hiring process. It's a lot of commitment to such a great school district. And finally, I just want to recognize what a great team that I get to work with. Our Director of IT, Mr. Merchant, our Associate Secretary Treasurer, Ms. Hamley, and our Executive Director of Planning and Operations, Mr. Sabo. I look very much forward to moving the district forward together with the superintendent, the board, and my team. So thank you again for this opportunity. I look forward to many, many years, and I hope they're in person very soon.
Thanks, Mark. Our first question this evening is from Trustee Higginson. I would like to start by saying thank you all for the work that people are doing to support students and families across NLPS. Can you talk a little bit about how we can ensure that there is equity of delivery across the district? I'm hearing reports of variance across the district and even within schools. What kind of quality assurance mechanisms are we employing?
Thank you. Through the chair, as I mentioned, there was opportunity with spring break being present as the announcement came forward and from the public health officer. So what we have been doing, we have a number of measures, guidelines that are in place in terms of expectations for students in terms of receiving the continuity of learning preparations and packages. What we are doing is we are working with our principals. We've had a number of online meetings with principals, and they are working directly with their staff. I will acknowledge that the delivery, the mechanisms, platforms that teachers are using may vary. Obviously, these situations are going to vary from grade to grade, elementary to secondary, but even within classrooms where teachers are aware of who their students are and what the needs of students may be. What I can say is that at the elementary level, there is a great emphasis that's placed on literacy, numeracy, and mindfulness activities right now in support of students, right up to, again, the secondary students and the grade 12 students who are in a position for graduation this year. So through our instructional leaders within our schools, our learning coordinators, literacy coordinators, we are working very closely with school staffs to ensure that there are mechanisms in place to support all learners.
Thank you. Trustee Higginson, do you have a follow-up?
Nope, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Trustee Brzezowicz. Can the Deputy Superintendent speak to the safety measures in place in the delivery of hampers and at the learning and care centers?
Yes, thank you. And again, through the chair, I'm going to acknowledge the fine work of our safety department and our manager for occupational health and safety, along with our occupational health and safety officer, and also acknowledge the work of our maintenance staff and the management team through our maintenance department. we have taken measures, obviously looking at the provincial guidelines, the public health guidelines that have been put forward, along with the guidelines for just employee health and safety within our own district and across the province. So in terms of social distancing, we have taken measures to ensure that there are safe environments in which we are both where any employees are working, but also where students may be attending, where we have safe distances. We've reduced class numbers, for example, at the learning and care centers. We have taken provisions where we have check-ins in the morning, so health checks are taken for all students and employees who may be entering into these sites. And it's the same with the food delivery distribution center. There are guidelines in place as to cars that are lining up for employees who are receiving the food. Anybody who's working in the centers in terms of keeping social distances. And I will say it's the same thing is taking place right now for the distribution of Chromebooks to support families. We've got 6 distribution sites, and there are very stringent guidelines in terms of how the rollout of these devices is taking place and the delivery or handoff to students and families. So it's of the utmost importance to us that health and safety for all students and staff is a top priority for the district.
Thank you. Trustee Brzovic, do you have a follow-up?
No, other than to say thank you, staff, for your excellent work in this area.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Our next question is from Trustee Keller. To build on Trustee Higginson's question, what are we doing to ensure that learning continues while school is not in session? And how are we supporting teachers at a district level to standardize to be able to deliver online learning in a way which benefits students across the district equally?
Okay. One of the things that we're doing, and again, aside from distributing over 2,000 Chromebooks to families, is we're also through our teachers identifying needs that families may have presently, and this goes back a couple of weeks when teachers started making initial phone calls just to check in and really see how families and students are doing. And the continued conversations that not just our classroom teachers, but other support personnel are making to families right now. So we are looking at needs in terms of families beyond technology that may go into supporting Wi-Fi needs for families that may not have it, other resource or equipment needs that families may have. Really, it's just that ongoing communication. And one of the things I will point out is that in terms of the continuity of learning is really around mindfulness, recognizing and providing opportunity through curricular supports to families that may be looking at ways that they can support their child or our students around mental health aspects as we are working through these difficult and challenging times.
Trustee Keller, do you have a follow-up?
No, not really. I think it's recognized that it's a challenging learning environment. We're all working from home in different ways, and I just appreciate the efforts that staff are dedicating to this. Some of the challenges I think have already been said. You know, that it's not necessary that students aren't necessarily receiving the same type of instruction or using the same platform, even at the same grade level. So I was kind of just curious about, you know, if there's any coordination that's happening at a district level to try and level the playing field, if you will, between grade levels and schools and whatnot.
through the chair, if I can respond to that, we do have a team that has been producing, again, guidelines and supporting documents for school staffs in terms of providing equity in terms of expectations, but also equity in terms of delivery models and supports that we can put forward through our teachers and staffs attached to those sites. I just want to recognize that just as we have learners who are at differing levels, in terms of their own learning needs and aspects, I can say that we will have staff who are at varying levels in terms of their own comfort and awareness around delivering education in a different way, a new way. So, I hope that people recognize that this is a new experience, a unique experience for everybody, including our teachers. And I know that our staff and our employees are working very hard to support families at this time.
Can I add a little bit?
Please.
Sure.
Thanks, through the chair. It was only the week of April 6th that we asked teachers to communicate with families. The week of I'm confused. The week of April 13th, we asked teachers to sometime to start that continuity of learning plan. We've only been in this a very short time. It's only really been a week. And so while that feels like months in COVID time, we never asked teachers for perfection when we started this, and we're learning as we go. This is new and unique, and what I'm seeing and hearing about is really innovative and creative ways that teachers are engaging students and differentiating their instruction.
Thank you. Our next question is from Trustee Stanley. Many families are feeling overwhelmed in their attempts to continue their children's education. Can we speak a little about how social emotional learning is being addressed and what supports are available for our students? How are our expectations of achievement being attenuated in this situation?
Okay. Through the chair, if you don't mind, only because I know that we skipped an earlier question. I don't want it to be lost. I'll attend to that one first and then come back to Trustee Stanley's question. So Trustee Higginson had put forward a question around playground equipment and use on the sites. As trustees are aware, and I'm sure that families associated with our schools are aware, our playgrounds at this time are closed in terms of playground equipment for general public use. Obviously, that ties into health and safety standard that our district is adhering to, and expectations that we have that students will not be on playground equipment. So at this time, as our learning and care centers are open, we are encouraging for students through their support staff and through teachers to get outside and enjoy nature and fresh air, but we are not having students accessing playground equipment, just again because of the health and safety measures. So thank you for indulging me on that while we address that question. Second question here, Trustee Stanley, we're looking at just an acknowledgement, I would say, first of all, that these are challenging times for many. We do have parents who are home with their children who are trying to, as best they can, support their child in their education. Again, that can come in many different forms and across the spectrum, K to 12. So what you will see, again, you can have families that may have multiple children within their household as well. So you might have a parent or two parents who are at home trying to support the education in terms of a online platform that is being presented by the classroom teacher. And you know, I just want to acknowledge that we know that this isn't an easy task for our families. We recognize that, and we do applaud the efforts of our parents out there right now. The other part to the question here is about the social emotional learning. Through our school-based counselors, through our school-based teams, our student support teachers who provide support to children that may be outside of the realm of the classroom teacher. Our support staff, our teachers, and our support staff continue their work supporting our teachers in their delivery and also communicating directly with families. One aspect that I will point out here is that we are closely monitoring students who are connected in with their classroom teachers or families who we have not had contact with yet, which you know, raises concern for us, and our efforts will be increased to make sure that we do have contact with those families, because we don't want for people to be you know, slipping through the cracks, as we may say, but we also want to ensure the well-being of all of our families out there right now. I've mentioned it numerous times, but it's just an acknowledgement of the challenges and the difficult times that many families will be going through. And what I'm highlighting for you this evening is the ways in which all of our staff across the district are seeking to support both our students and the families that they are connected with. So, thank you.
Trustee Stanley, did you have a follow-up?
I want to, no, not kind of. I want to say, Superintendent Saywell also made a comment. So thank you, Deputy Superintendent Davies, for all the information and for the attitude, frankly, more importantly, about that, you know, good enough is good enough. And we're really all just trying to do best we can. And that is going to be, you know, good enough for now. I really appreciate as well Superintendent Saywell making the comment that we never ask teachers for perfection. I really think that that's an important message that we communicate both to our staff and our families, that we're all in this together and we're just trying to get through this and we're all trying our hardest, and that is good enough. And I've personally received that from our teachers, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful to hear your communication that you know, have an understanding of the emotional aspect that's going to be contributing so heavily on our students' education. So thank you.
Thank you. So I'll be moving around a little bit on our speakers list. Our next question is from Trustee Barron. How are we identifying and accessing our most vulnerable and challenging to reach students that would benefit from supports, including food hampers, Chromebooks, and other additional supports?
So again, through the chair, and thank you for the question. When we are looking at contact with families, as I mentioned, this is our initial contact was made through classroom teachers, and again, that was contact to families, to parents. Really, it was a chance for our staff to check in directly with families to see how they are making out, to see how the students are making out, and really to clarify if there are any specific or identified needs at this time as to ways that we could support. I'm going to acknowledge through this question, again, the work that people such as our school counselors, our child and youth family support workers, and our student support teachers SSTs, the work that they would be doing at this time, along with the work of some of our educational assistants who may be connecting with families as well. Really, we've got employees who care deeply for our students, and this is their chosen profession, but going beyond that, this is also their passion. And during these times, you know, for all of us to be able to pull together and demonstrate that care for our students is really important. So we've got a number of staff who are reaching out directly with students or directly with families, and that may be ongoing just texting to make sure that people are doing okay, you know, to phone calls, emails, or other communications such as we're on this evening where teachers may be looking at face-to-face communication with groups of students and just delivery of learning opportunities. Food hampers, the Chromebooks, there are other resources that we're looking at. We are working again closely with our local First Nations communities to see if there are specific needs and ways that we can support within our First Nations partners and our communities, as well as I will say the trusted and valued partnerships that we have with other agencies. I'll give you an example. I'm aware that we have had the Ministry of Children and Families reach out to our staff and look for ways specifically for students that were identified through MCFD as to how we could best meet the needs of vulnerability within certain segments or groups of students within our community. So just ongoing communication, I think, is the key to that response.
Thank you. Trustee Barron, do you have a follow-up?
Am I on here now? Sorry. Yeah, technical issue on my side. Yeah, no, thank you. That perfectly addresses the question that I had, Deputy Superintendent Davey, around I guess I was trying to understand better the collaborations that were happening to serve our most vulnerable students, both internally within the district and externally. And you've spoke to all those areas nicely. So thank you for your response.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Our next question is from Trustee Robinson. I understand that the foundation is planning to continue the food program through the summer. Is there any way the district could support them?
What I'll say in terms of response to this question, we continue to work very closely with the Nanaimo Ladysmith Schools Foundation, and we have ongoing commitment at this point in terms of our work. You know, as we move forward and we continue to receive updates through the provincial health officer and updates through our local medical officer, as well as updates through the Ministry of Education, we will continue to respond as we have and look for ways in which we can continue to provide support to our students, their families, and within our community. So these are ongoing day-to-day conversations. We make adjustments every day as we're moving forward, and you know, I'm sure you can appreciate through the responses and the questions that are being raised here that there's work that's going into this to make sure that we are responding in a manner which is respectful of our community and acknowledging the needs and our civic responsibilities as both an employer through our Board of Education, but as individual members of our community in ways that we can respond and support the needs of those that need us the most at this time.
Thank you. Trustee Robinson, do you have a follow-up question?
I think it's going to stay on this time. No follow-up questions, but as the board's representative to the foundation, I took advantage of this opportunity to let the public know what the foundation is planning. And I recognize from our point of view, right now we got a lot of other priorities before we even think of this summer. I mean, we're talking about tomorrow and trying to make decisions for that. So I just wanted to make us all aware of the great work the foundation is doing. And I can tell you they appreciate the support they've been getting from the district, and you in particular, Tim.
Thank you, Trustee Robinson. And again, a lot of kudos to the fantastic employees and staff that we have across this district.
Thank you. So our next question is along the same lines from Trustee Stanley. Regarding food hampers, we are learning important information about the level of need in our district. Can we collect this data and communicate it out to the public, the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, so that they can better understand the challenges our district faces?
So I'll take an initial response to that, and then if our superintendent would like to speak further in terms of the connection with the Ministry of Education and other ministries, please do so. What I will say is that in terms of the data collection, we are keeping data right now, and it's really important through our communications department, our executive director for that department, that we are communicating out the great work that is taking place here, but also, as has been pointed out by Trustee Stanley, it also just highlights or identifies the needs that we have within our district. The other piece that I'll add to this, and there is a great unknown here. We as a district probably had a very good handle on and continued to work with outside agencies in terms of ways that we could support students and families within our district. The unknown is, what has COVID presented now for our community? As we're aware, there are many families in need and situations where families may have lost employment or other means in terms of their own income. We know that social distancing creates, aside from opportunities, it also creates a lot of anxiety and tensions within individuals and possibly within families as well. So, as we move through this, we will continue to be identifying needs and ways in which we can support our students and families and contribute to the community. And at the end of this, whenever that may be, and as Secretary Treasurer Walsh pointed out, hopefully sooner than later, but we don't really know what the end result of this is going to be. And certainly as a district, I feel that we have an obligation to be identifying those needs and stepping up to the challenges when all is said and done and we're presented with a new reality here.
Thank you. Trustee Stanley, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next question is from Trustee Keller. How are students receiving continuity of learning at the learning care centers?
Good, thank you. And again, through the chair. So what we're looking at, and I will acknowledge the great work of those individuals who are stepping up to support our learners at the learning care centers at this point. This is aside from being a directive, I mentioned civic responsibility, and we do have a mandate and a responsibility to be supporting our essential service workers and their children, so that they can provide the necessary services that they do within our community, and just keeping our social fabric functioning in a very important way. So, on top of that, I will acknowledge the essential work that the district is providing in providing this care. So, in response to the question here, what are we doing? What we're looking for is families to bring schoolwork forward. So through the continuity of learning plan that students have presented, we are asking families to be bringing those materials forward. Again, in terms of technology, Chromebooks are available at the learning and care centers for students to be accessing. Everything, as I mentioned, is done in a manner where health and safety is the first priority. So things like issuing individual pieces of technology, having regular cleaning going through those centers is really important. And on top of that, our staff that are there right now under the care of educational assistants and guided by teachers and administrators attached to that site. We are working to support the learning needs of students, just as parents would be doing well in the home. And really within that, what we're acknowledging is that many of our essential service workers are putting in long hours and working throughout the day, and it may not be possible for them at the end of a day or end of a shift to be able to come home and support the learning of their children in their home environment. So we're looking to support students in that way. We are also asking for parents to send a tote or a backpack or something with students' own belongings, whether that be toys that they can play with, Lego, whatever it may be, to help with that social emotional aspect. Reading books, I can say that we have had music teachers who are singing with students and going to classes. So there are different ways in which our staff are supporting the learning opportunities for students at this time. We coined these centers as learning and care centers because this goes beyond simply a classroom environment, and it's really about the care of our students first, and the provision of learning opportunities as we can support these families and students at this time.
Trustee Keller, did you have a follow-up?
No, thanks. Just thank you, Mr. Davies. I recognize the importance of our civic duty in providing the care, and I appreciate your answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Trustee Higginson. Are we utilizing any of our schools as Wi-Fi hotspots for students to come to, inside or out?
In response to that, again, things are changing daily and certainly weekly. At this point, again, through the provincial health order and our conversations with the local medical officer, we're not encouraging people to be coming to our schools other than the learning care center or the skills care center that we have open. So we are not looking for our school sites to be accessed as local hotspots for Wi-Fi. But what I will add to that is through our Director of Information Services, looking at technology for families, we are identifying any families where data or Wi-Fi may be a challenge, and we are looking for means or ways in which we can support those families to really be supporting their children on a more equitable field as we move forward. So work is being done to find ways that we can support families in terms of Wi-Fi.
Thank you. Trustee Higginson, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may, through the chair. There are a couple things we're exploring. We are trying to engage parents so that they are aware of some of the deals that are going on right now. TELUS's $10 a month deal. We're also working with IT to explore internet data sticks that we could get out to those families as well. Even one suggestion around our buses having Wi-Fi. If we parked it in a community for a while, then students could connect to Wi-Fi in that way. So early days, still exploring, more to follow. Thank you.
Trustee Higginson, follow up?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Trustee Brzovic. To follow up on Trustee Stanley's question, how are we supporting our staff around their mental health needs and stress levels at this time?
Okay. Thank you, and very good question. So I appreciate that. That we are, again, I've spoken a lot about the ways that we're supporting students and supporting families at this time, but recognition that we have a number of employees within our system, and our efforts to be able to support them. I will, through the chair, acknowledge the fine work of Lynn Brown, who is our manager for mental health and addictions, and we are very fortunate to have a person of Ms. Brown's talents and skills in that position. She's noted a number of ways in which our principals can be checking in with their staffs, and we do have daily check-in with staffs. We also have regular meetings with staffs, and I'll say also there are provisions for staff-to-staff communication as well, and at this time we also have provisions for our administrators to have teams that they're checking in with. So we have a lot of layers in terms of ways that we are supporting ongoing communication and check-ins with staff, and a part of that is just a determination around mental health and stress needs. I'm going to also, again, just acknowledge the fine work that's been done through both our Human Resources Department and our Health and Safety Department in ensuring that different forms of communication are going out there to staff and alleviating any concerns that they may have as best we can as we seek to mitigate risk environments, specifically when we are engaged in any rollouts or redeployment of staff to sites such as the learning and care centers. There's a lot of work that's going into this, and specific online orientations, orientations in small gatherings, just to put people's minds at ease as they are looking to support the needs of our students and families going forward.
Thank you. Trustee Brzovic, do you have a follow-up question?
No, thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Davey.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from trustees on this area of our agenda? Great. Thank you, everyone. So that concludes 13.1. Just want to share the immense gratitude that's being shared by trustees right now for staff and all of the work that they're doing. Thank you very much. So moving forward into
through the chair, if I could.
Of course, go ahead.
I just want to mention that we're all missing out on the 7 o'clock banging on the drums. I can hear it out my window.
Hear it other too.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm surprised you can't hear my kids. Okay. 13.2, Deputy Superintendent Davey around Administrative Procedure 223.
Okay. Thank you. And again, through the chair, just changing gears here. And you know, this is also a form of acknowledgement that aside from the great work that's taking place, you know, to meet the requirements that COVID-19 has put before us, there are ongoing efforts just to continue the work of the school district, and the recognition of Admin Procedure 223 is part of that. So it's my honor to bring forward tonight just to be able to share with you an update on this procedure, the selection of learning resources procedure. And just for trustees acknowledgement, again, in your packages, you're looking at page 20 to 23. What I'm going to share with you, I'm not going to be going directly to the package, but I'll just be giving you a bit of a background and also some information as to why this particular admin procedure was selected and where the changes that you can note will be found. So first of all, as a background, the original Administrative Procedure 223 was adopted in 1978 and amended in 1993 and 1996. And this revision that I'm sharing with you this evening allows us really to modernize the NLPS selection of learning resources administrative procedure to meet our current 2020 requirements. And some of that is around simply the addition of technology and the advances that we've made in terms of technology and other resources that are available to teachers at this time. In terms of information, the Board of Education of the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools, NLPS, is committed to the board's goal of continuous improvement and instruction and assessment. The amended selection of learning resources administrative procedure is designed to support student learning and increase student success. Selection of learning resources, AP 223, has been updated to include, and I've got bullet forms here, refining learning resources to include digital and media. The next point, outlining general guidelines for selecting resources, and that they must be from either the Ministry of Education's list of resources or from the ERAC list of approved resources, or need to comply with the criteria as set out in this admin procedure 223. So there are really some guiding criteria that will go into the selection of resources that are outlined in these updates. In addition, of the criteria of the privacy and copyright legislation, so that is also brought into this update, especially for media and digital resources. And finally, these updates include guidelines for streaming commercial film, video and audio files, and an in-depth explanation of the BC rating system and the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools requirements for selection of resources. Rationale for the changes that were updated to this admin procedure 223 include reflecting on current standards in general terminology, inclusiveness, social considerations, example, Indigenous peoples perspectives that are brought into these selection criteria, sustainability, and privacy and copyright legislation. The rationale also includes digital and media formats in the term learning resources, as these formats have become more and more prevalent in the classroom. Another form in terms of our rationale is the following of a standardized set of criteria for the selection of learning resources as used by ERAC, with an additional consideration for digital media and audio resources. Also under consideration is the alignment with the privacy and copyright legislation and changes that may be present there. And finally, in terms of our rationale for updating this admin procedure, is alignment to the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools practices with regards to the selection of learning resources with other districts across the province. So really, what you should find in the updated version of this admin procedure is just bringing us up to date and in terms of selection and criteria for resources across our district. So I present this as an information package for the Board of Education this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a note before I take questions from trustees. It's just that any questions that are asked by the public will be addressed during our question and answer period on the agenda. Are there any questions from trustees? Okay. I'm not seeing any. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Davey.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So that moves us on to our next item on the agenda, 13.3. I think what I'll do here is ask our Secretary Treasurer to open this up for Executive Director of Operations and Planning, Pete Sable.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this evening, the board will recall that every year around June, the board submits a capital plan to the ministry for consideration in a variety of areas of funding, from seismic to environmental upgrades. And so tonight, what we're asking the board to do is consider a bylaw, or recommend a bylaw, passing a bylaw that will support the capital plan and the various projects that the Ministry of Education has supported. So with that brief introduction, if I could turn it over to our Executive Director of Operations, Mr. Sabo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. And through the chair, there's a fair amount of information attached to the package, and I thought I would speak to it briefly and then be available for questions. The action sheet is on page 29 and 30, and as Secretary Treasurer Walsh indicated, speaks to the requirement for a capital bylaw to support the projects. Next in your package, you'll find the capital submission documents from last June, and they're listed Appendix A and B on pages 31 to 35. After that, on pages 36 to 39, you'll see the March 5th capital response letter from the ministry. This is the one that indicates those projects that the ministry has supported from our request package last June. After that, on page 40 to 49 is the annual programs funding agreement, which is signed and is the contract between the district and the ministry for the delivery, for the provision of funding and the delivery of the projects. And finally, you'll find a slide deck at the end of that package that essentially just gives an updates on the projects that the ministry has mentioned in the letter. And that's a bit of background for the trustees so that they could understand that detail, as staff hadn't had an opportunity to give them a very recent update on those projects. So I think perhaps rather than going through the slideshow, because I know the trustees have had that in their package, in the interest of time, I think maybe I'll pause to answer questions trustees may have. I'd be happy to go through the projects in detail if that's required as well.
Do trustees have questions at this time? So I have a question from Trustee Keller. One sec. So from Trustee Keller, Rutherford is proposed to be used as a swing space for the Pleasant Valley seismic upgrades. My question is, what will the upgrades to Rutherford include? And will the upgrades put the school in a condition that's acceptable for future use following completion of seismic upgrades? As you are very aware and remind us frequently, our elementary schools are full, and in some cases are exceeding capacity. If this project proceeds, would we be in a position to consider Rutherford in the long-range facilities plan for use as a swing space or other learning programs? This makes me think about another question. Will or can the condition of Rutherford building be improved to the extent that it is no longer in a structural maintenance deficit, for example, to a condition acceptable for longer term use?
Thank you. Through the chair, I've got the chat up on the side of my screen, so I'll attempt to address the questions one by one. First question, what will the upgrades to Rutherford include? And will the upgrades put the school in a condition that is acceptable for future use following completion of the seismic upgrades? The seismic upgrades to Rutherford are intended to make it habitable for a year while the students, while Pleasant Valley is undergoing seismic upgrades. It will not put the school in a position, in an acceptable position for continuing. And what I mean by that is that the school will not receive a seismic upgrade for the swing space. In other words, Rutherford School itself will have to go into our capital plan with respect to future use for items such as significant capital upgrades. So while the upgrades are estimated in the range of about $700,000, they are reasonably cosmetic and safety related and are intended to keep the school running for the approximately the duration of the current seismic project at Pleasant Valley. In the future, it is possible. Okay, I'm going to pause and go back to. Are you, as you are aware and remind us frequently, your month just goes full. I think with respect to the question about the long-range facilities plan, I believe the current project is to utilize Rutherford for 1 year during the construction, which would be the 21-22 school year. It's also possible the ministry, given the size of our seismic program, would grant additional seismic projects, and we may choose to use Rutherford in the future for a swing school. It's also possible that after review of our requirements in the long-range facilities plan, that we consider other futures for Rutherford Elementary School.
Trustee Keller, do you have a follow-up question?
I mean, I think for me, what's challenging me is the fact that we really don't have a strategy tied to our overall seismic mitigation program and how we're going to be accommodating students and what spaces we're going to use and what the costs are going to be and what that looks like and what kind of efficiencies we could gain if we actually had a plan. So I don't really have a follow-up. I hope for an opportunity at some point in the future, whether that's through the long-range facilities plan or some other board document, to have an opportunity for a discussion to put some plans in place so that this isn't coming to us as one-offs, because I don't think this is a good way to plan.
Thank you. Our next question is from Trustee Higginson. One moment. Is there a date?
There we go.
Go ahead.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if it was clear because I kind of was in a hurry trying to type too quickly, but thank you.
That's okay. Is there a date for which, sorry, technical difficulties over here. Thank you. Is there a date for which the South Wellington work must be completed, noting that the community has continually for years expressed an interest in this property? Is there time for us to work with the community to determine if there is a way to make the property meet their needs and desires? I'm thinking of the joint agreement that we have with the town of Ladysmith around Davis Road. Is there something prohibiting us from undertaking the same type of agreement?
So perhaps I could address the question about the timing of the program. And if you turn to page, I'm looking for the letter. If you look at page 37 of your agenda package, the Ministry of Education has asked the district to respond with a draft business case by June 1st, 2020. At that point, we would expect the draft business case to include the information that the ministry would need to determine if they would complete the project, provide us with funding. So during that time, I would imagine that there is an opportunity to consider consultation.
And perhaps I can add, Chair?
Yes.
And so generally with respect to the land itself, and perhaps a bit further to Trustee Keller's earlier question, that issue will be generally addressed in the long-range facilities plan. Well, we certainly would anticipate that it would. Certainly that doesn't solve or answer the question of immediate demolition, but certainly from a disposition of land perspective, we would expect for those types of issues to be addressed in the long-range facilities plan. And to add to Mr. Sabo's comments earlier about Rutherford and swing space, to Trustee Keller's question, certainly we would anticipate that we would see a seismic plan that has multiple years and how they fit together as a puzzle to get us where we need to be from a safety perspective in as fast a turnaround as possible.
Trustee Higginson, do you have a follow-up question?
I do. I'm going to try to frame this as a question. I feel like I recognize that this was in the June capital plan. However, there's quite a history with this particular property, and for a long time the community has expressed to us that they would like to work with us on the property, and we kept telling them that we were going to deal with it in our long-range facilities plan. And at no fault of the communities did our long-range facilities plan continue to get bounced around because of elections. And then when we were all elected, it took us a bit longer to deal with it. And so it feels to me like we've kind of skipped the queue a little bit in terms of what we've told the community, because we said we'd deal with it in the long-range facilities plan, and that's where we would talk to them about their desires for it. And now we've gone ahead and put it in this capital plan and been sort of accepted. I'm not really sure whether we've been accepted for demolition or not. So I do believe that it is very important for us to work with the community on their needs and desires for this, since they have been so patient with us and we kind of skipped the queue. And so I don't know if by approving this bylaw that's been put forward, if we are able to continue to do that, because the bylaw is such an omnibus bylaw that I feel like I would like to know that we have the ability to work with the community on the many years of requests they've put in for this property.
Thank you. So perhaps I can speak to the level of approval by the ministry to start. So the Ministry of Education has provided a letter indicating support for the project, and they've indicated a next step for us to meet in order to receive further consideration. My understanding with the ministry is they don't provide projects with support if they don't intend to follow through, subject to the appropriate business case or concept plans or PDR being submitted.
Mr. Walsh, did you want to add anything there?
Just perhaps, Mr. Sabo, if you can comment about what are the costs of the planning to get it ready for June, for a June start, if that's what we intended to do.
Oh, yes, thank you. So the planning would include engaging consultants to essentially bring the project forward to tender ready. That would be a prime consultant to help us with the demolition contract, and an environmental consultant to assist us with understanding the hazards for removal. It's essentially, it can be deemed a deconstruction project. And the cost for that is currently under review, but in the order of $30,000. The Ministry of Education asks that districts fund these planning costs up front, and then they allow us to include those costs in the business case submission. And when the project's approved, the district can recoup those costs.
And so in the event that the board approved this bylaw, that's the next step would be for us to proceed with the planning. In the event that we spent the money and didn't proceed with the actual demolition, I can't see us receiving the funds back. So there would be likely the cost or the issue that we would be facing is approximately $30,000, give or take, because Mr. Sabo's being approximating right now.
Okay, so I just want to sort of wrap this around for clarity's sake. So what you're saying is that the bylaw will not prevent us from consulting and determining what our plans are for that property, but that if we choose to go forward with planning for demolition, that it would cost us a certain amount of money, and if we don't demolish, those are our expenses out of our budget that are not recoupable.
I anticipate they would not be recoupable in the circumstances. Certainly we could talk to the ministry. And to be clear, normally this bylaw, if passed, would mean that we are just proceeding. Staff is just proceeding with all of these projects. Obviously, if there was direction to explore another option here, with a report back and final approval, that wouldn't be in the norm, but it wouldn't be out of the question, certainly. Mr. Sabo, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. I'm thinking about the ministry's intention for the program. And I think the intention for the program is that properties do not sit encumbered by closed facilities that districts and communities are finding difficult to work with to move forward with planning. And as the district knows, we did receive some funding from the ministry to demolish the Harewood School and then subsequently the Extension School, which allow us to continue with our planning for those properties. I think the ministry's program's evolving. Last year was the first year of the ministry's program. I think they're changing the guidelines a little bit. There may be there's obviously, I believe, the opportunity to work with potential stakeholder groups if that property is going to be considered for alternate community use prior to leaving our hands. Maybe there's opportunities to have a business case, do selective demolition or something to that effect rather than demolish the whole building. I think there is an opportunity to consult and understand, does the community want to take ownership of just the land, of the building and the land? Certainly taking ownership of the building and the land would save the ministry a demolition project. Not really understanding at this point what understanding the concern raised from the community, but we haven't had that opportunity to fully understand what their intent would be for the project.
Okay, I'm just wanting to make sure that by passing the bylaw, we can still allow ourselves that should we need to. And I believe that what I heard was yes.
Yeah, I believe so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair McKay, can I ask a question?
Certainly.
I'm just wondering, Mr. Sabo, if you could share your opinion on the usefulness or safety of that building. My understanding is that the foundation was sinking and it had a host of issues.
Yes, thank you. I don't have the list of issues at hand, but let me think out loud for a little bit. The building does have a fire suppression system that we had to install that's standalone because it doesn't have a fire line and requires significant maintenance. The building is on a well system that we had to upgrade because of an arsenic content levels that the government changed. It is on a septic field that will require renewal. The site is on the small side, and we did look at it for alternate use. The building does not have a activity center, although the district functioned for years using one next door. I think the biggest thing for the building is that it was when it was on our seismic plan, when it was a building that was in use, was rated the highest seismic risk of all elementary schools due to the soft story nature of it. Besides that, it wasn't in the best condition, and it could be described at this point as dilapidated. And I guess the use of the building could be viewed in the eye of the beholder if volunteers wanted. We've seen before where volunteers have wanted to take over a building that the district was looking to demolish. at North Oyster, we had volunteers. We worked with them, and they actually moved a portion of our building across the street and created a community center. At Cedar Secondary, the corner of the site, we worked with the community in the RDN, and we left a portion of the old building on the corner of the site, and that was 20 years ago. We're looking at renewing the license for that. We'll pause.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move on to our next question. That's from Trustee Stanley. Regarding the South Wellington School, have there been any discussions about the use of the land? Are there plans to consult with the community about the use of the land should the school district decide there is no foreseeable use?
I can jump in on that. I can say that in our asset management plan, South Wellington was listed as a property approved for possible disposition. At this point, the ministry project is not specifically about the disposal of the property. It's really about the building, the liability of the building, and it being an encumbrance and being a liability against us in actually doing something with the property in the future. So the current project isn't actually to dispose of the property, but it does help us with that liability and gets us to a place where we could make decisions about the property.
Okay. Trustee Stanley, do you have a follow-up question?
I'm just trying to process all that information. Sorry, my brain didn't catch up to you yet. Thank you for all this information. Thank you, Trustee Higginson, too, for providing some of the history. Being a member of South Wellington and the community, that was useful. I'm really grateful to hear the variety of perspectives of being open to community consultation on this. The community's very passionate about their school and very attached to that building and land. However, albeit passionate, they are not unreasonable. So, you know, if it was, you know, as Mr. Sable put, decrepit, I think that was your word. Then I think that of course the community would be reasonable, but they would very, 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 very much appreciate consultation on this and an ability to if it is available to they will view it as save the land. But the community cares deeply, and I'm glad that from listening in this meeting that I'm going to be able to report back to the community what was described as an openness to consultation. I think that they will be thrilled. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Our next question is from Trustee Keller. With respect to South Wellington, as a general question, does the province ever consider funding partial demolition if there is a community demand for space?
Through the chair, I did read the ministry's most recent capital submission guidelines for this particular program that the South Wellington falls under. And I do believe they've expanded the flexibility of that program. So I wouldn't rule that out as a possibility of something that we could work with the Ministry of Education or the community on. Again, I believe the intent of this program is to come up with solutions for these types of situations.
Thank you. Trustee Keller, do you have a follow-up question?
Not a follow-up. There was one more question below, but I'll wait my turn for that one. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on. Trustee Keller has also our next question. Can you please provide a brief overview of our planning process? Did community consultation come before the capital plan submission?
So without having had an opportunity to go back and take a look at all of the detail, as I indicated, the project was listed in our February 2018 update to the Board of Education with respect to our asset management plan as properties approved for possible disposition. And so I do believe that the plan was consulted on at some point and made public. So that's really all I have on hand at the moment. And then, of course, there was the capital submission itself.
Trustee Keller, did you have a follow-up to that?
No, I don't think so. I don't, if I recall, I don't remember that being part of our last long-range facilities plan.
Okay.
Just so for reference, there was information that went April 25th, 2018 to the Board of Education with respect to an update on the plan. So that's what I'm, for the trustees, that's what I was referring to.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Higginson has a follow-up question.
Thank you. I'm trying to find, the right order for things here, considering the history of the property. And what I'm wondering is it possible, and I know this would have to be a discussion with the board because it's about staff time, but is it possible, and I just want to know how staff feels about it, to meet, if they're available to meet, and I think they will be based on the letter we got today, to meet with the South Wellington Community Association before the June 1st deadline, just to hear from, like, I know that they are really chomping at the bit to be able to make this property something that's meaningful to their community. And I just wonder, I just think that we need a little bit of communication with them. I'm not talking about a huge detailed plan, but I know how great our staff is at meeting with the community and building bridges. You guys are so good at it. And so I wonder if that's something staff is open to, meeting with them in order to be part of that business development case. Because if we have to develop a business case for the demolition, then it feels to me like it's an opportunity to include that initial consultation that could help provide that direction.
So perhaps I can respond with absolutely. I would be happy, and I'm sure Mr. Sabo would join me to meet with the community. Absolutely.
Yes, agreed. Be a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm moving on to our next question. Just taking a moment here. So our question's from Trustee Barron. Can you clarify what you were saying around the liability and the processes we have undertaken on how it connects with our level of liability as a district? I think I've combined those to hopefully make that sense.
Yes. Closed buildings. Closed buildings are difficult to manage, or have been difficult to manage in the school districts. And we have a couple of examples of schools that were closed a significant time ago. And fortunately, we've had two demolished, one Harewood School and one extension. And in this plan, there's also a business case asked for by the ministry for the old CRC Library Services building on Selby. Harewood sat for almost 14 years in deteriorating condition, to the point where the roof was collapsing, and we had to go in and we had an engineer work with us, and he basically determined you have to spend money now to keep it from collapsing and becoming a liability. And we're not far off that now on the CRC building on Selby Street. And as time marches on, we won't be far off that on a school like South Wellington, an old closed school like South Wellington, because we don't invest in those buildings once they're closed, unless they have like a future use for the district and we're keeping them in rehabitable shape. That's not the case for South Wellington. It's been subject to vandalism and various issues in the building, and so we're sort of keeping it running. So liability really becomes as these buildings age, and the cost to keep them from becoming problems in the community, and costs to keep them standing.
there a follow-up, Trustee Barron?
Thank you. I think that answers my question. I guess you did clarify some of the background of what I was trying to wrap my head around, so thank you for that, Mr. Sabo. I'm wondering though how this particular process that we've undertaken to date, where we put forward a proposal for the building to be demolished specifically, how that process that we've put forward is interconnected to, I heard, maybe I misheard, that there was a connection there around liability, is it because, sorry to think out loud right now, but is it because you're speaking to that proposal needed to be put forward for something to happen with the school site in order to decrease our liability, or was it that particular project? Like, how does that fit? Am I making sense?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So there was a connection that you made between the particular project being put forward in order to decrease our liability as a district. And so what you're saying is that there's a liability with us doing nothing with the property. It's not necessarily specifically the request to demolish that decreases that liability. It's just that we need to do something with the building, just to be clear.
Again, I'm not certain I fully understand. Yes, leaving the building without a plan and without a district use for the building leaves it in an ever deteriorating condition, and it just continually increases the liability to the district. The Ministry of Education has provided a capital envelope for assisting districts and communities for managing these issues.
Yeah.
And the district chose to apply for it to take advantage.
Okay, so then I apologize if I can just follow up because I realized I wasn't being clear. I guess I'm just trying to understand, because was the demolition to demolish considered to be the most feasible option to move forward with in order to decrease that liability and to get something happening with that building? Or
Yes.
were there other options considered?
Yeah, notwithstanding the current comments made by the community of requests, there were no current discussions underway with respect to purchase of the building or purchase of the land or taking over the land, understanding that there's been delays in the long-range facilities plans, etc. And so yes, demolition of the building and opening up options for the district in the future did appear to be the best option at that time.
Okay, thanks for the clarification, and sorry for being confusing there.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do is I believe that we've got some information here that everybody would just allow me a moment. In light of our need to pass a couple of motions regarding our capital bylaw, I'm going to ask that Trustee Higginson, she has an intended motion to bring forward, which I believe will not impede our ability to pass our bylaws this evening, but will also allow the board to move forward in a way that feels appropriate for the board. So I'm going to ask Trustee Higginson to propose her motion.
Thank you. So, you know, I'm okay. I'll start with the district staff meet with the South Wellington Community Association and the RDN to be part of the business case development and report back to us on that process. I guess it would be the May Business Committee meeting, since we have to have the business case in by June. So just reporting back to us as part of the business case, an initial meeting with the South Wellington community and the RDN as part of the business case development for the demolition.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask everybody to allow me to pause 1 second.
There's a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Yeah, 1 moment. So it's been moved by Trustee Higginson and seconded by Trustee O'Neill with an amendment. Trustee Higginson, would you like the amendment to come forward, or would you like to speak to it first?
Well, I'll just say that it's not my intention at this point to stop it, because I think for all the reasons that have been pointed out, you know, the liability, the condition of the building, but I do think we need to meet with the community to engage in this process and then make some further decisions. And then I'll welcome the amendment.
Trustee Stanley, you had an amendment you'd like to make?
It may not be required, but I just, it's more like, do we need to have it specific that it's the South Wellington and Area Community Association? That's what SWACA stands for. So I don't know if that's required or not, but if it is, that's the specifics.
Okay. We can allow the motion to be crafted to include the appropriate wording.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Are there any questions on the motion or discussion on the motion?
Can I just finish up if there's none?
Yes.
I don't want staff to feel like I don't value the work that you do, and that we feel like I kind of feel bad about having to make this into a motion, but it appeared that that was what some folks on my colleagues want, and I understand why. So I hope that that is understood, that it's just about, you know, a history with this community and making them feel better about engaging on a property that's really important to them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Trustee Stanley?
Thank you for allowing me just a quick comment in regards to Trustee Higginson's comment and echoing her sentiments. I just want to say that I think that given that we're in a pandemic and emotions are heightened right now, and that my communities, you know, this is emotional for the community, I do want to express immense gratitude with staff's willingness to consult with them. This will go a long way in kind of, you know, building a bridge with that community. So, you know, whatever little effort you're able to do it in this time will be greatly appreciated, and I think actually very important. So I have a lot of gratitude for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Robinson? Are you there, Bill?
I think it's ready now. It refused to work. Yes, just a comment. This has been going on since I first joined the board, and I think it was in our first year that we closed South Wellington. And there's been this desire back and forth, discussion back and forth. I'm really pleased that staff is willing to meet with them out there. And I'm really pleased that Secretary Treasurer Walsh is with us to help lead that along with Pete. Let's bring it to a conclusion one way or another. Let's make a decision and move on.
Thank you. Trustee Barron?
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering if Trustee Higginson could or the chair could reread the motion. I was just interested in the specific wording at the beginning, and I think it's great, but I'd like to hear the wording again.
Trustee Higginson?
Staff meet with the South Wellington Area Community Association and the RDN as part of the business case development.
Thank you. I just couldn't remember the wording, but meet with is good wording for me, and thanks for bringing this forward.
Thank you. I have a trustee that would like to call the question. So is there any objection to the motion? Please type an objection in the meeting chat if you are opposed. Seeing no opposition, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. So I'd like to move forward into further in this section, specifically into the first motion that we're looking for this evening around three readings of the bylaw. So I'm looking for a trustee to move the first motion I can read that motion aloud and then look for a mover. That the Board of Education of School District 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, give all 3 readings of the capital bylaw number 2020/21-CPSD68-01 in one meeting, and that the Board of Education of School District 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, adopt capital plan bylaw number 2020/21-CPSD68-01. If I get someone to move the motion. It's been moved by Trustee Wilkinson, seconded by Trustee O'Neill. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing no opposition, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Just allow me to pause. Okay. Okay. Trustee Stanley, we have passed the motion to do all 3 readings of the bylaw. If we could have the minutes state that Trustee Stanley was not present for the vote, please. Okay, so we'll be moving on. You guys are getting really easy. I feel like you guys are getting a deal tonight because I have to read the motion and normally I don't need to. So I will read the first reading of the bylaw and then I will ask for someone to move it. Whereas in accordance with Section 142 of the School Act, the Board of Education of School District Number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, hereinafter called the Board, has submitted a capital plan to the Minister of Education, herein called the Minister, and the Minister has approved the capital plan or has approved a capital plan with modifications. Now, therefore, in accordance with Section 143 of the School Act, the Board has prepared this capital bylaw and agrees to do the following. A, authorize the Secretary Treasurer to execute a capital project funding agreement related to the capital projects contemplated by the capital plan or the capital plan with modifications. B, upon ministerial approval to proceed, commence the capital projects and proceed diligently and use its best efforts to complete each capital project substantially as directed by the Minister. C, observe and comply with any order, regulation, or policy of the Minister as may be applicable to the Board or capital projects, and D, maintain proper books of account and other information and documents with respect to the affairs of the capital projects as may be prescribed by the Minister. Now, therefore, the Board enacts as follows. The capital bylaw of the Board for the 2020/21 capital plan is approved by the Minister to include the supported capital projects specified in the letter addressed to the Secretary, Treasurer, and Superintendent dated March 5th, 2020, is hereby adopted. This bylaw may be cited as School District Number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, Capital Bylaw Number 2020-21-CPSE 68-01, read a first time this 22nd day of April 2020. So I see that this has been moved by Trustee Higginson, seconded by Trustee Brzovic. Is there any objection to the motion? Thank you. So that passes. So what I'll do is then I will read the next portion to make it easier for everyone. And then I'll ask for a mover and a seconder as well. Oh, I'm glad I don't need water yet. That the Board of Education for School District 68 adopt the bylaw cited as School District Number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, Capital Bylaw Number 2020/21-CPSD 68-01, read a second time this 22nd day of April 2020. So a mover, it's been moved by Trustee Barron and seconded by Trustee O'Neill. Is there any objection? Seeing none, it carries unanimously. And finally, that the Board of Education for School District 68 adopt the bylaw cited as School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, capital bylaw number 2020/21-CPSD68-01, read a third and final time, passed and adopted this 22nd day of April 2020. If I get a mover. Moved by Trustee Higginson, seconded by Trustee Keller. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so I think with that, I will pass it back to the Secretary Treasurer Walsh to move forward in this section with the next area of business, which is 13.4.
Thank you, Chair. So again, I'll turn it over to Mr. Sabo in a moment to discuss the recommended motions with respect to the hopefully soon to be proceeding projects. But I just did again want to recognize his work in building these projects to ready to go. It's quite an accomplishment to get or to be looking at multiple seismics in a single year, and particularly the planning, the significant planning that's gone in and it's going to go into them. Just a kudos. So I'll turn that over to Mr. Sabo to review.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much through the chair. Again, there's a fair amount of information attached on this item. The main issue is on page 67 and 68, where you will, here I'm going to flip there myself. On 67, you find an action sheet indicating desire to have Bradley Shuya Architect appointed for the design and construction supervision of Rutherford. And on 68, you'll see a motion with respect to Herald Engineering for the design and construction supervision of the seismic mitigation project at Pleasant Valley. These two sheets essentially recommend prime consulting contracts for the two key components of this seismic upgrade project. One for the actual design and construction of the seismic at Pleasant Valley, and the consultant we're recommending is actually a seismic consultant and not an architect. And we're going to focus on the seismic upgrade, and there's not a significant amount of architectural. Bradley Shuya would actually act under that project as the design consultant for the minimum amount of design work required in that seismic upgrade. The second part is the prime consulting contract for the alterations to the swing school, which is Rutherford, where Mr. Shuya would act as the prime consultant, and he would be working with the sub-consultants, electrical, mechanical, to make sure that the building was properly planned for the receipt of students. This work is much like the project, the Solaire project, as it is planned to move the school population into Rutherford for the 21-22 school year while the upgrades are being performed. The swing school itself will need to be upgraded during this next school year, the 2021. So staff want to work with these groups to not only get the Pleasant Valley work going, but to also get the Rutherford work going, which needs to be to start this next school year. As you can imagine, this is a complex project with a swing school, and Secretary Treasurer Walsh is no stranger to these projects, so his words are, I thank him for his words. He understands the complexity of projects like this and the extra work to do the swing school to get the students off site. This work was designed to ensure minimal disruption to students during the upgrade and accelerate the schedule so that work can be performed faster. You may recall that we had over a 3.5-year upgrade project at Wellington School. We worked with, and part of that was because we had to upgrade one area and move students, and upgrade another area and move students. This will allow us to move the students once to Rutherford, essentially into an environment that's ready to have school with no disruptions from contractors. The contractor will have the entire site at Pleasant Valley to perform the work, and he'll be able to do that unencumbered by school operations. Site congestion was also a factor in this decision, as it is quite congested at the street that Pleasant Valley is on, and the thought of actually adding a construction project at the same time became an untenable thought. The project does include some opportunities for busing so that we can redirect the existing buses and extend routes and provide additional busing for students over to the Rutherford site. The rest of the package speaks a little bit to staff's plans with respect to consulting selection on other projects. And there's a slide deck, but I think before I get into that or address it, I'll pause and see if there's any specific questions on the Pleasant Valley action sheets.
Do we have any questions from trustees? Just pause for a moment. I'm seeing no questions.
So what I'd like to do, Madam Chair, is share the presentation that I have in the package starting on page 69. And in the interest of time, get to the key points.
Okay.
Now, could I get confirmation that this slideshow is visible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So staff felt it was important that we talk a little bit about the selection of consultants for capital projects. And there was some discussion with the Solaire project in January around the procurement of consultants, and staff have had an opportunity to consider selection process and wanted to sort of outline our thinking on that. And so you can see by this slide, there's a few key things. Staff reviewed the policies and procedures that might be applicable to selecting consultants. There's at the board level, there's a policy with respect to operational expectations. There's AP 513 that speaks to purchasing, and under 13.2 it talks about procedures for selecting consulting services, and it talks about those being the responsibility of the executive director of planning and operations. AP 501 speaks to the selection of architects, talks about selection criteria for projects over 500,000 and under 500,000. And I just wanted to point out that architect equals coordinating professional in some cases. I think this is the important slide for me. Staff had to think about how do we come up with a plan to proceed with projects and include adjustments for procurement. And what staff plan to do, and I've got a spreadsheet that sort of indicates all the projects, we plan to award or continue with projects that already are in progress. And we want to do that because we want to ensure that progress is not materially affected and project delivery times continue on schedule. Concurrently, we plan to enter into a pre-qualification process for consultants. We would apply this to projects in progress deemed not materially affected, and we would select consultants then from a pre-qualified list based on their capacity, experience, qualifications as they apply to the scope, schedule, and budget. Until the pre-qualification process is complete, the executive director would continue to apply judgment in selection of consultants and would do so in conjunction with the secretary treasurer and apply projects as circumstances indicate. With respect to the selection of architects, it's felt that the application of that particular policy would apply most to projects of significance. And so projects of significance might be selecting an architect for a significant replacement, like a $70 million replacement to NDSS, a significant new school, or even a major addition. With the pre-qualification process, the idea here is that we can select consultants at the beginning of a project and not have to delay it during the ministry's project approval process by having a procurement in the middle of that process. And so in order to do so, and we believe it's going to help us meet the aggressive timelines that that the ministry and the district apply to projects, that if we understand, if we pre-qualify prior and select the consultants, then we can carry them through to the end of the project without, you know, as long as they subject to performance and pricing, etc. And so that way we don't disrupt projects, and we allow consultants to go through a pre-qualification process and get onto a list that the district would, perhaps not exactly, but in a sense, rotate through consultants awarding projects. Also, Secretary Treasurer Walsh pointed out to me that he's seeing the same things. He's seen the same things we are, where consultants are very busy, and sometimes it's difficult to get consultants to be available to do your projects. This next section, this projects worksheet, it's in your package. It was designed to indicate the number of capital projects and the total project value. And if you look over to about the middle of the sheet, you'll see a total project value. And if you look down that column, you'll see $48 million. And if you look over to the next column, it'll say estimated consulting, $2.3 million. And so these are the projects that this is the relative value between what we're talking about in construction consulting services and the total project of the value. So you can see here that the most significant value in the project is the 48 million, which is actually tendered in construction value for those projects. So while we may be looking for sole sourcing of some of the consultants, there's a significant amount of value for the project that is tendered. This next worksheet indicates the significant projects within the AFG for this year's approved AFG that we're going to procure consultants for. And so you can see here that I've listed the top 5, and they're projects where the estimated consulting services are $10,000 or more. We haven't made comments on the other projects that are below the $10,000 value. The capital projects that we plan to proceed with that wouldn't be included in a procurement call at this point would be the projects listed on this page. And so these are the projects that we really don't want to interrupt the delivery process at this point. We have consultants that are significantly involved in the project and providing excellent services for the district. In fact, these are the consultants that helped us put together the packages for the ministry that garnered us the ministry approval to proceed. And so you can see it's quite a list of projects we want to continue with. The next slide are projects that we're looking for consulting approval on, and those are the 2 action sheets that we've spoken about earlier on this topic. And then we do have a significant project that's early in the planning at this point, and that's the approval for the 9 modular daycares on 5 sites. And that's one that staff are currently doing some planning prior to making any decisions or recommendations with respect to consulting services. And it is possible that these could be included in a pre-qualification for consultants. The next section was put together as a section to talk about some of the project details. Again, I won't go into those details, but maybe I'll pause here and see if there's questions with respect to the information presented so far.
Thank you. Okay, let's take a look here. So I have a question from Trustee Barron. In the slideshow, it is identified that the pre-qualifying period to be often under aggressive timelines whereby it calls for proposals that are made. You know what? I'm going to stop and I'm going to ask Trustee Barron to ask her question.
That was really hard to type.
That's okay. Thank you.
Maybe I'll read it in the grammar that I actually meant to put in there. Thanks for trying, Chair. I was just wanting to ask for some clarification around the explanations in the slideshow that are provided around the tendering process and the pre-qualifying periods and how that relates to what we're being asked to do in the motion around Pleasant Valley, and sort of understanding how we move forward under the circumstances that we're in. Specifically, you talk about the pre-qualifying period being a time that's often under aggressive timelines. You call for proposals and they're made and they're shortlisted. And it says in there also that the intention is to select pre-qualified proponents with the intention of carrying consultants to the completion of a project. So my understanding is that you're wanting to identify individuals within the pre-qualifying period, which then will continue on to complete the project. And in the case of Pleasant Valley, we're being asked to provide a variance to the tendering requirements. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around how, with ongoing tight timelines for us to meet in the district, you know, won't we always find ourselves in this scenario where we're always having to make a variance to the tendering process? And I'm wondering if you can clarify your thoughts around how we can meet the tendering process procedures that are in place while also meeting these aggressive timelines, and what challenges we need to consider in being able to do that effectively moving forward. Yes, hopefully I'm understanding properly, but I was just trying to look not just at this Pleasant Valley example, but future examples, and how do we, you know, is this a problem that we're always in this position where we're looking for a variance to the tendering process? And if so, then how do we move forward to avoid this ongoing challenge?
Yes, thank you, and great comments. I think that you're giving me the opportunity to better explain myself and the process. So let me talk a little bit about the Pleasant Valley project, or the Solaire project. So we put in a request for a seismic project, and the ministry came back and said, okay, we would like you to provide a PDR by a certain date and an SPIR by a certain date. Those timelines were so tight that the district barely had the opportunity to sole source consultants to try and make that timeline. The district wants to achieve ministry timelines because the ministry, if we do so, we have a better opportunity to achieve ministry funding. And so at the beginning of the project, the district is under pressure to provide consulting services. And so we sole sourced those consultants to put those packages together and meet the ministry's timelines. And we did. And we got a good response from the ministry. So now the question comes, do you procure for that project, or do you continue with those consultants? And of course, the discussion is, these people are they helped you formulate the very project. They know all the intent of the project and all the details of the project. To go out and try to procure through a qualification process, or to go through a process to have others compete for that project with them, causes time in the next stage for the project delivery. Plus it's challenging because that one construction firm or that one consulting firm has all the information there, and if they perform successfully, you want them all the more. And so what we're trying to do is break that cycle. I recognize that there was a cycle there to some extent. If we keep reacting to the ministry's timelines, then we keep sole sourcing, and we don't have that opportunity to do that pre-qualification for other consultants. So the idea here is that while we might want to continue with certain projects right now, that we would run a pre-qualification process, and that we would break the cycle by, once we have that pre-qualification process complete and consultants on a pre-qual list, we can then select from that pre-qual list at the very beginning of a project, at the very genesis of the project. Therefore, we've met the intent of the guidelines to, on the procurement, better met the procurement timelines. And we have a company that we can carry through with because we've procured them using a process, and we're not at risk of delaying the project through the various project phases.
Do you have a follow-up, Trustee Barron?
Thank you for clarifying. No, I think some of the future questions will help with my follow-up questions, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so our next question is from Trustee Stanley. Tendering requirements are usually required to ensure fairness and good economic decisions, for example, best price. Help me understand the critical thinking process in this decision making. How does altering this process still ensure fairness of procedure and that the district receives the best price for the work?
So perhaps I could jump in for a moment, Chair.
Sure.
And if it would be okay, perhaps I would answer this question as well as Trustee Keller's question, asking about whether amending the procurement policy, procedure and policy for more transparency and streamlining. That's, I think, the next step for us is that particular point, and I think that that Mr. Sabo has made a number of important points in his presentation about why we would be looking at doing this over and over, frankly. So just from the very, very basic, and is that when the board puts in its capital plan and then the ministry says, yeah, that seems like a good idea, we go out and we seek someone to do the work. And typically, so in the case it's architect or X or consultant X, they do the work that gets us across the finish line to actually get the $8 million. And so the consultant or the architect is actually a relatively minor amount in the overall project budget. And so that's what we're trying to seek the continuity for all the purposes that Mr. Sabo brought up. I think it's really important to note that from a fairness perspective, that the construction itself is still going to be tendered. So when we look at a project of $7 million, what we're talking about is the consultancy fees of maybe 400, which I know is not minor, but the idea of competition and best price is still going to go out for competition. But the continuity and the benefit that you get from continuity of a consultant in a situation like this is pretty significant. And to Mr. Sabo's point, the fairness is preserved when we go through a process of having pre-qualified consultants in the first place. And so one of the things, obviously, we're not asking for a change in the policy at this point because we haven't reviewed it in depth enough to know, but Mr. Sabo and I think that was our first discussion, is making sure that it aligns with transparency and the best way that we're going to protect the interests of the district. But obviously, these two individual circumstances, our recommendation is that it is preserving the best interests of the district. Mr. Sabo, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I don't, not at this time.
Thank you. Trustee Stanley, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, so that is helpful, but I'm halfway there. I'm not all the way there. So let me contrast this to the idea of when we look at our budgets and we make budgeting decisions. And sometimes we have to make significant pained decisions over, let's say, $50,000 or $150,000. So now we're contrasting that to, a couple of million in consulting fees. So that's where somewhat where I'm challenged, is that we have these procedures that are intended to be cautious in our extremely limited funds, and that we have to make prudent decisions in those, and sometimes really painful decisions. But now, comparing that to looking at the architect fees or consultancy fees, we're now kind of saying, hey, it's only a couple million. Like, help me out here in the sense of, how is it that we know that this is the best decision-making process that I, I use the words fairness, and as well as transparency, and ensures those kind of ideal values in these decision-making processes. Help me know that we are making the best decision possible is kind of what I need you to walk me through, including devil's advocate, the other side.
So maybe I can jump in and add a bit of information that might be not transparent to people when they're talking about procurement and consultants. When you procure consultants, it's not about price. So, and I think Secretary Treasurer Walsh will be able to comment on this. It's really about achieving a consultant that has the experience and the credentials to achieve your aim for the project. And that on these projects, we are paying, in a lot of cases, especially on the large projects, we are paying standard industry rates for those consultants. And so it's not about, that we're going to get a significantly better price. In fact, the district has the reason we have different procurement guidelines for consultants is because it's not about specifically about the price. We've had situations where in the past we have received qualification proposals and we have selected the lowest price only to find out cheaper is not always better, and the consultants come back with extra costs because they lowballed the price. And so that's just one component I thought I'd throw out there.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to move on to a follow-up for Trustee Keller's question because his question was also answered in the previous response from staff. Trustee Keller, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm pleased to hear that staff are considering amendments to our policies and procedures. I would feel a lot more comfortable if this was sort of outlined as our standard protocol or procedure, if you will, versus coming back to us as sort of one-off projects because of timelines. So thank you.
Thank you. So our next question is from Trustee Stanley. If the ministry timelines are making it impossible to follow our policies that are intended to provide fairness and good economic decisions, have we provided this feedback to the ministry, or should we look into changing our policy to ensure best practice? So I think we've answered the second part, but have we provided that feedback to the ministry?
Have we provided information back to the ministry that their timelines are making it difficult for us?
Correct.
No, not specifically. I guess I think the discussion is pretty clear that it's incumbent on the district to ensure that it finds a way to follow its appropriate policies on tendering, or has the appropriate policies so that it can match the timelines presented by the ministry. That would be my perspective on it.
Okay, thank you. Let's see here. All right, I think that's the end of our questions. Any other questions from trustees before I move on? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I think what I'll do at this point is propose the first motion, and then I'll be looking for someone to move and second it. That the Board of Education of School District 68 Nanaimo Lady Smith directs staff to award the contract to Bradley Shua Architect, Inc. for the design and construction supervision for the Rutherford Elementary School renovations, supplementary to the seismic mitigation project, Pleasant Valley Elementary School, subject to funding approval and the successful negotiation of a service agreement. So I'm looking, so I have that moved by, oh, hold on. I'm going to have that moved by Trustee Keller and seconded by Trustee Stanley. So I make my notes. Is there any objection to approving the motion? Seeing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you. And then that moves us into our following motion, that the Board of Education of School District 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, direct staff to award the contract to Herald Engineering Limited for the design and construction supervision for the seismic mitigation project, Pleasant Valley Elementary School, subject to funding and the successful negotiation of a service agreement. One moment. Moved by, one second. So that's moved by Trustee Keller and seconded by Trustee Stanley. Is there any objection to moving the motion? Okay, seeing no objections, it's approved unanimously. And I'd like to pass on behalf of a couple of trustees who have passed their thanks on, actually many of our trustees, so I think I'll just say from all of us, there's an immense amount of work put into these slides and presentations and information sheets for us to make these decisions this evening, and so we're very appreciative of your work and your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. This moves us along our business of the evening to 13.5, Secretary Treasurer Mark Walsh, funding model review.
Great, thank you very much, Chair. If I could bring trustees to the report regarding the funding model change. So my intention is to briefly go over what the changes to the funding model are, answer any questions that you might have about what's not been changed, and then give a little bit of context to how that's going to affect, we anticipated affecting us for the current year, or sorry, for the upcoming budget, and then go over what the budget timelines will look like. So if I could get you to briefly turn to page 3 of 4 of the present, or of the memo, and perhaps Ms. Matthews, if you could bring that up. Oh, and before I start, I just actually want to recognize the work of Associate Secretary Treasurer Handley and Director of Finance Sutton for their amazing work in preparing this evening and bringing me up to speed on the changes for budget boot camp, I guess we'll call it. Oh, page, what page is that? It's 86. So I'm not going to go over in depth what the recommended changes to the funding formula were. And the reason I'm not going to do that is because there actually hasn't been a great deal of change to the funding formula. So here in the bullet points that you can see, sorry, I'm just trying to see what you're looking at. If we could go scroll a little bit further down, Karen, to page, yeah, to the second last page of the report. Yeah, that right there, please. So you'll see ultimately there haven't been major changes to the per pupil allocation, the way that was ultimately recommended by the funding review committee. So a number of important changes, no per head count at this time. So of course, a per head count move, I understand would have benefited Nanaimo and Ladysmith, but that change hasn't happened. There's remaining supplements, and we can talk about those if you'd like. The biggest change is a new supplement called the Equity of Opportunity Supplement, which replaces a vulnerable student supplement that previously existed, as well as it lowers the amount of the education plan supplement. The impact on us, and we'll get to that in a moment, is actually relatively positive in this regard. You'll see a decrease to the education plan supplement, but again, it still exists in some form. The per pupil funding rate has gone up, and so the per pupil funding rate has covered the CUPE labor settlement costs. We have not yet seen an allocation for the teacher settlement costs because it's not ratified yet, but we anticipate funding to flow for that as well. Special needs supplements have been increased across the board based on cost pressures. Carbon tax has been rolled into the unique geographic factor, and the health tax has actually been rolled into the ultimate funding formula. So it's a little bit difficult to see because the ministry didn't announce here is the amount in the funding formula specifically for the employer health tax, but they did roll it into the formula. And so what I really want to do is focus on how this impacts us. And so prior to moving on, Director Sutton, did you have anything to add to that brief overview?
Hi, everyone. Not at this time. I think most importantly will be if there are questions, but just to reiterate that the employer health tax has been removed, the carbon tax has been removed, both of which have been rolled into the block. The new equity of opportunity supplement is a positive for our district and the per pupil as well. So overall, we are in a positive situation with this change. So I think for now, I don't have anything further to add.
Okay. Ms. Matthews, could you bring up the next slide with our numbers on it, please? In the agenda document, not the additional document, please. So that is the summary of 2021 MOE funding changes PDF. Is that can anyone see that?
Not yet.
I'm not sure what it's just the next document in the agenda. All right, perfect. So again, subject to questions, I'll be relatively brief, but you will see these are the inputs from the ministry. So these are not going to include, for instance, the international student numbers. We'll be back very soon with our anticipated revenues from international and other locally funded items. But what you'll see is the differences from year to year. And some links if you're more interested to see the actual rates and the documents issued by the Ministry of Education. So the highlights are our FTE is going to be going up by approximately 175 students. And so that obviously is a significant benefit to the district from a financial perspective. And so that's going to increase our overall revenues. The remaining categories under our enrollment are minor fluctuations from year to year, but nothing that's material. Then the next line down is the unique student supplements, and you'll see a significant decrease in funding for level 1, level 2, and level 3, and that should say level 3 students. And that's not ministry driven. That's just because 2019 to 2020 was, as I understand it, significantly out of the ordinary year for number of designated students. And so you'll see a fairly significant decline of 30 FTE from level 2 students. So we'll be having less money in those areas, but we'll be needing to provide less services. So that's not a deficit issue for us. The big one to look at is the equity of opportunity supplement. So this is a new fund, and that's actually going to be increasing revenues for Nanaimo. And so when you look at the provincial picture, I understand that some districts have been negatively impacted by some of the changes or have been impacted. We appear to have been positively impacted by the changes, not significantly, but here's an example of where we're going to have increased funding. So that's an important thing to note. Unique geographic supplement. So in Nanaimo, we get it for busing, for instance. It's going up slightly, but not significantly. And then you'll see small declines in the education plan supplement. And overall, in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll note that we are looking, because of enrollment largely, we're looking at an increase in revenue from the Ministry of Education of $1.332 million. So That does not cover our unfunded liabilities such as inflation, such as increases to principal salaries, exempt salaries, which typically haven't been funded by the ministry, which has been a regular concern of boards for a long time. But our overall assessment is that the changes to the funding formula are largely flat for the district. So we're not losing out that we can see. And perhaps before the questions, I just turn it over to Director Sutton to see if she has anything to add.
Thank you, Secretary Walsh, through the chair. Yeah, I would say that our overall increase in enrollment funding is lower only because of, as Secretary Walsh indicated, and board is aware, is 1920 was a full-on outlier for our special education students, and if we were to budget for those same numbers and not see those students at our schools, then that would be a considerable loss for us. So to be conservative and safe, we reduce those numbers. And so if those students do show up, if we do have those students in the fall, of course, we will gain considerable funding if we see the like numbers. So that's something to consider. And as well, again, of the 1.332 million, our labor settlement costs we have calculated to be 738,000, and our direct costs for staffing and allocations to school 583,000. So our overall costs directly to this funding is 1.3 million. So we're essentially breaking even with what ministry has provided us for the labor settlement, as well as the loss of the EHT and carbon tax grant. And as Secretary Walsh indicated, the portions of our costs of doing business that aren't funded are normal. So we will see increased revenues in September and we'll recoup those costs at that time.
So,
ready for questions?
yes, please.
Okay, so I'm just going to switch up the order here because I think one of our questions is regarding budget, but I think that might be better suited to come second. So our first question is from Trustee Barron. Can you clarify what portion of the existing education plan supplement will go into the Equity of Opportunities Fund and what will remain? What impact will this have on our budget, specifically around how the funds are spent and our level of discretion around such allocations?
Thank you, Chair. So if you will look on the bottom, I think it's the fourth line up, you'll see a line that says Education Plan Supplement, and you'll see the comparator from year to year. Last year we received 280,000, and this year we're down to 128. So you can see the decline is 151,000. With respect to the Ed Plan Supplement, Director Sutton, do you have the instructions from the ministry? Have we received them for 2021 as of yet?
Yes, we are provided with those annually, and those are just guidelines for us to use the funding for teacher collaboration time, transformational changes at the schools, review and development of local assessment and reporting policies, innovative timetabling and scheduling of learning opportunities, and reviewing of methods of collecting and sharing authentic evidence of student learning. So we are provided this funding, and then we report out on the items that roll up into these strategies dictated by the ministry.
And so with respect to the ability of the level of discretion, I don't believe that we've received any direct requirement for the Equity of Opportunity Supplement, but I will again ask Director Sutton if she has an update on that. The
Equity of Opportunity Supplement at this point in time does not come with any direct parameters for which to use that funding. It is to support additional services to students by recognizing children and youth in care, children and youth receiving non-clinical medical health supports, and low-income families in the school district. The supplement replaces the vulnerable student supplement and is funded from a portion of the curriculum and learning support fund. So they basically took the education plan that was funded at $20 per FTE and reduced that down to $9 per FTE and transferred that funding into a pot to then roll out into this new vulnerable students. Our district was not one of the districts that had funding for the vulnerable students previously because our community link funding was above a particular threshold. And so that funding was adequate for our district. Districts that were below a certain threshold with their community link did receive this vulnerable student funding. So for us to receive this equity of opportunity supplement will enable us to continue with the supports that our district is very focused on our special needs families and our community and our students. And so we do have a lot of supports that we will use this funding for.
And I'll add, when we do come to do the budget presentation, we will ensure that we have a little bit more information to see that whether the level of overlap between what we were doing with the education plan supplement dollars that are now been transferred over to the equity of the opportunity, but we are not anticipating at this time at least that it'll have an impact on the services that we're providing.
Thank you. Trustee Barron, would you like to follow up?
Yes, please. Thank you for the information. Hopefully I won't be confusing this time. I feel like I've been a little confusing tonight, but if I can clarify, money from the education, the previous that we had in existence, the education plan supplement, which we still have in existence, money from that went into the Equity of Opportunities Fund, as you're describing. So just to clarify, the money that has been moved from the education plan supplement into the Equity of Opportunities Fund, currently we have a general idea of how those funds will be targeted, but we don't have the specifics. Mm-hmm. And just to follow that, the other clarification is the money that remains in the education plan supplement that wasn't moved over, do we have specifics around how that money is to be spent?
Director Sutton, do we have the instructions for 2021 yet? Have they been issued?
No.
So we would anticipate that what we'll do is we'll make sure that we provide trustees, and we can post it on the website as well, the instructions from last year. But until we get instructions from this year, we won't be able to be certain what those instructions are.
Okay. Thank you. I could ask more, but
that's always easy. So I'm going to go on with one more question because I think it's related to what we were just discussing, and then I'm going to come back to Trustee Higginson. Trustee Berzovich would like to clarify, is the vulnerable student funding separate to Community Link?
Yes, 100%. So we maintain our Community Link allocation, and now we get the Equity of Opportunity supplement as well.
Thank you. Trustee Higginson, go ahead with your question.
Thank you for letting me ask it instead of type it, because my eyeballs hurt and so does my brain. Like most of us, it's been a long day and I've been sitting in front of a computer since 7:45 this morning, and wow, I don't know, I think I need glasses or something. So really what I want to talk about or just address is, you know, I appreciate our budget process that is laid out here, the budget calendar. I'm wondering if our staff, this is bonkers times we're in, and I am trying to understand how we are budgeting based on the number of possible scenarios for school next year. I don't think we've received direction from the ministry other than particular risk factors we should be budgeting for. Yeah. But I do feel like next year might look like A or B or C or possibly a bunch of blend of all of them. And how it looks is really going to impact our spending. And so I just wondered what, I'm not being very articulate and I apologize for that, but I just wondered what we are doing to account for the various scenarios that we may be presented with in this very uncertain time to ensure that we have the financial ability to respond when necessary.
Sure. So maybe I could answer in a couple of ways. And when we do present our assumptions, we'll be able to speak a little bit more to it. So the first step, I guess, is the obvious and immediate one, is anticipating less international students, for instance, and figuring out how that's going to impact our budget and impact our schools. The ministry has said fairly clearly that they have no intention of clawing back any savings from COVID, although we are tracking all COVID expenses and all COVID savings. They've said they're not going to take them back. At this point, we are tracking some fairly significant savings, as you can imagine, not having replacements and not just spending the day-to-day dollars. So we're hopeful that if that is correct, and we can only assume that it is, that the board may have some unrestricted surplus to be able to address that issue in September, if indeed that we do need to have some unexpected expenses, for instance. So that's one area. So ISP is one. Looking at how we're going to be addressing our our savings, our COVID savings is two. And right now, Director Sutton is certainly having lots of discussions with various departments about their current level of spending, and seeing where to make sure that we balance it. So for instance, if Department 1 is not using all of their budget this year, find out why they're not and determine if they're going to need it next year. So to make those little tweaks. Given the relatively healthy situation that the district is in because of, not conservative, but risk-averse budgeting, so having an unrestricted surplus and making sure that we have a staffing allocation set aside if we need, certainly gives us a little bit more, I guess, wiggle room. Director Sutton, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that, ministry did provide a document out to districts for items that I think most districts have already anticipated because we've been going through this scenario. And so we're looking at additional cleaning supplies, we're looking at potential custodial, we're looking at reducing our overall investment income due to current interest rates plummeting. We're dealing with reducing our rentals and leases. So there's many things that we are looking to shift to ensure that we are being fiscally responsible. Secretary Treasurer Walsh is absolutely correct. The International Student Education Program is currently our biggest area of discussion and risk, and we are in a situation where we do have a staffing contingency. Board is aware of that. Our surplus policy has a item in it where we have $1.3 million available, and we also have a $1.28 million unrestricted surplus at this time. So I think ministry is actually looking to provide a bit more direction as to what the international student situation is provincially, and we're looking to wait for that, but timelines are timelines, so we'll have to be making some decisions fairly soon. But we're doing all of our due diligence that we can and anticipating what we can in order to make sure that we are accounting for the biggest areas of risk.
But to also be clear, we are going to be presenting a relatively status quo budget.
Yes.
But obviously having contingencies available to us so we can be nimble to address any specific need.
Follow-ups, Trustee Higginson?
No, not direct, just that in the presentations of the budget, what I would like to see is, I appreciate status quo, it makes sense right now, but I think we also know very clearly that we are going to need to increase our cleaning and our facilities. And so I guess what I'm looking for, what would be great in our budget presentation is, you know, I heard the word contingencies. So it's sort of like status quo budget, but with the possibilities of A, B, and C. If we're going into school with social distancing, how are we going to clean for that? What are we going to do? How much is it going to cost us? And as a result, where are we going to cut to be able to do that? Or is it the recommendation of staff that we use surplus monies to pay for the possibilities of that rather than cut services? So.
Yep. And another example that the superintendent and I have discussed is, if we're going to be doing this current situation of learning, you know, we need to support our teachers with some Pro D on techs theoretically. So there's a variety of things that we need to contemplate, and we will bring some scenarios, or at least, you know, the contingencies to be able to support the scenarios and costing.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was very thorough and thoughtful responses to those questions that many of us are wondering about. I appreciate that. I believe that is the end of our questions.
Okay.
Did you want to speak to the budget calendar?
Yes. And again, I just wanted to recognize the fine work of Director Sutton in well, with her and Associate Secretary Treasurer doing all the work. But okay, so we discussed the budget calendar here, and so you'll note that the document on screen is actually slightly different than the document in the agenda. And so you'll see here, we're talking about, oh, I've got to bring that document up. Okay, so you'll see here tonight, April 22nd, and then the difference from the agenda is the April 29th date. And Superintendent, I don't know if you want to discuss that.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, just that we have been contemplating a way to engage our student population and get feedback around the budget process. And what we landed on was bringing a group of 30 or so students together in a Microsoft Teams meeting, and having our Executive Director of Communications, Dale Burgos, facilitate a process whereby we would get some feedback from students, senior students in, we're looking at secondary schools and asking principals to find us some students, maybe 3 or 4 students per secondary school at, you know, their choice.
Okay. And then, oh.
No, thank you.
So I'm trying to scroll up on the document. Could you go down a little bit on the document? Okay. And then so you'll see on May 13th, the presentation of the proposed preliminary annual budget. So the numbers from this evening, ISP numbers, various revenue numbers that are local versus our expenses as per usual. And then the opportunity for partner groups to have a say and have some feedback on what's presented. And then May 22nd, you'll see another opportunity of the annual budget. And finally, the June 17th date for the adoption. And so that gives sufficient time for the board to have some input, and if there's any issues, we have a little bit of runway after June 17th. If there's any significant changes that we hear to amend, hopefully that won't be the case. But we thought that you know, we needed a little bit more time to do this, and hopefully that this works for the board.
Great, thank you. So I appreciate the work on this. We had some great conversation to figure out how to shift things around and try to make it work for our staff of various departments to come together in helping us build a great budget this year for our upcoming year. So I did have a question, and I just want to speak to it briefly. In the case that our June 17th special meeting, where we are not at the point as a board of ready to adopt the budget, we would then we would still have time to move into our regular board meeting as typically scheduled in June to complete that work. So I just wanted to acknowledge that question, and in case anybody else was wondering about that. Are there any other questions on the budget calendar? Okay, seeing none, that concludes that area of our business this evening. So I just want to thank you. This is a great deal of information. We're moving forward in a really good way, and so I appreciate, given all the changes and our current circumstances, budgeting is going to be a little bit difficult as we move through things and make adjustments, and I'm just appreciate the response at which our finance department and all of our departments are coming together to do that work. So we will be moving on. So I just want to acknowledge the time to the board. It's 8:53. We have one more section to get through and then some questions. So I just would like us to power through and see if we can conclude this. And if necessary, then we'll pass a motion at 9 o'clock to extend, but we should only need a few more minutes to complete this, to complete our meeting for the evening. So I'd like to ask Director of Communications, Dale Burgos, to present to us the thought exchange feedback on the budget.
Thank you very much, Icewell. Hello, bonjour. Thank you. Through the chair, I'm going to try and rifle through this really quickly. Being mindful, of course, of the time, but I know everyone's got a long commute home. I wanted to just start off with, and I'm just going to pop this on the screen. Thank you, Karen, for getting that ready. On this screen right here, what we're going to be discussing right now is, of course, the 2021 budget thought exchange that we had just completed. So on the screen that you see here is an overview of how many participants, and a total of 323 participated in the thought exchange. A total of 253 thoughts were left, and in ratings, there were 7,750. Basically what that means then is the amount of people that participated, the amount of people that left thoughts, and then some people or all people had voted on those ratings from 1 star or no star to 5 stars. 166 participants shared thoughts. That's 51% of the total participants. 222 participants rated their thoughts. That's a 69% rating. And 203 participants explored their thoughts, all the thoughts, which is 63%. Now, if I can go to image number 2, I'll start by just explaining there were 2 qualifier questions. And let me just wait for that to pop up. The 2 qualifier questions that we had in terms of they're either called survey questions or qualifier questions. The first one was, understanding that you may identify with more than one of the following roles, please select the role you identify most closely with for the purpose of this exchange. And I'll pop this on the screen right now. And it's a little small, but if you look onto page 93 of the agenda, you can actually see maybe a little bit more close up. So 21% of the participants, or a number of 65 people that participated in the engagement, were employees of the district or are employees of the district. 77% of the people, so the largest cohort that took part in this exchange, at 241 participants, were either a parent or guardian of a student in the district. And then the numbers are now much smaller. 1% were people who, 1% or 2 were students of the district, and 1% or 2 were a member of the general community. The second qualifier question, in which region do you reside? Number 1 region was Nanaimo region. That included everywhere from Lanceville, of course, Nanaimo. So essentially RDN, we're looking at Cedar as well. And then we get into the Ladysmith region, or CVRD, and that's at 13%. And then there was a 1% that were other. Now I'd just like to get really quickly into the all data, and I won't go through this. There's many pages, but you'll see in the agenda on page, and I'm gonna leave this screen just so that we can load up the new one. On page 93, there were 3 links, and you could see the all thoughts ratings. There's about 34 pages in that document. The Nanaimo region had about the same, and so did the Ladysmith region. I'm going to pop up the all data. And on this page, I'm just going to go through maybe the first few, and these are from the top down. These are the most highly rated or ranked thoughts. And so what we could see for number 1, we need to spend more money on students' education, not administrators. The second one, if you can scroll down a little bit, Karen, excuse me, keeping class sizes as minimal as possible. The third one, the third highest, increase the number of classroom teachers, specialist teachers, and EAs in schools. Number 4, smaller class sizes. And number 5, education assistants are not optional. So those are the top 5 thoughts. I wanted to bring this because then you see this as all data, and then I'm going to switch the screen now again. I'm going to go back to me while Karen gets the Ladysmith region document up. This one here, I wanted to bring these up specifically because there has been conversation at the trustee, or at the board table rather, about the differences between Nanaimo and Ladysmith. And so with Ladysmith, I'd like to just compare between the all data and then of course with Nanaimo. The top one here, keeping class sizes as minimal as possible. Again, we're in the Ladysmith region. More educational assistance, more support for children with special needs. Number 4, education assistants are not optional. Let me throw that on the screen here, apologies. And number 5, more EAs. So you'll notice some similarities between the two. Classroom support, for example, EAs was also mentioned. But going through the Ladysmith region, I just wanted to highlight a couple different pieces here. Some other comments that had nothing to do with possibly learning or classroom. There was automated hand washing faucets was mentioned. That was further down in the engagement. Safety, so in terms of trash recycling or needles on site, that was also mentioned. And after the whole COVID pandemic, goes away, if it ever goes away, there was a mention about continuous cleaning after COVID. So that was in there as well. That's again further down. I'm going to go back to my screen, and I'm going to get Ms. Matthews to pull up the Nanaimo region document now. For this document, we've got some, again, similarities. Again, you can compare this when you look online on these documents here. And I'm going to pull this up for you right now. Number 1, we need to spend more money on students' education, not administrators. Child and youth mental health, physical education. Stop overspending at the district level. We don't need more coordinators, assistant superintendents, etc. Increase the number of classroom teachers, specialist teachers, and EAs in schools. Children with special needs and behavioral issues need more one-on-one support during educational hours and recess. So those were the top 5. Elsewhere in here, I wanted to point out there was something to do about safe drinking water. So that goes back to the lead and water testing is my assumption. So those are the high level pieces in terms of what you see in the thought exchange. I'd like to actually just talk a little bit about heat maps. If I could just take a couple more minutes here. I know the time is getting late here.
Actually, Dale, if I could get you to pause,
Sure.
We need to pass a motion to extend the meeting for 15 minutes.
Oh yes, of course. Go
If
right
I could
ahead.
get somebody to move that motion. So it's moved by Trustee Keller, seconded by Trustee Stanley. Is there any opposition to extending the meeting for 15 minutes? No, thank you. Go ahead, Dale.
Okay, thank you to the board. Just a couple more minutes here. Now, looking at all this data in the paper, you can go through it all, but I thought it would be really important to just bring up some of the information that I found in the heat map. And what a heat map is, it's essentially giving us the information that's really talked about a lot in these documents. So some of those pieces that I had found in the heat map, the top item, smaller class sizes. The second top item, classroom support. Third was mental health. And number 4 was EA support. So in terms of just the number of mentions, or those words specifically mentioned in the thought exchange, those were mentioned quite a bit. So I just wanted to again share those with the board. And that is it.
Thank you. So we just have one question, and I think this question perhaps is for Secretary Treasurer Mark Walsh or Superintendent Saywell. Let me see. How will this feedback be reflected in the budget proposals?
Superintendent, do you want to address that, or do you want me to?
Yeah, you can start. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, we've talked about focusing our start on a status quo budget, and obviously we're trying to reflect the strategic plan as much as possible in the budget as well. And so we will be taking the results of this and the result of our student surveys, and I think it will inform trustees at the time of the debate. I'm not sure exactly how much shifting will be there as a result of the recommendations, but we want to make sure that the trustees are aware of what the community is thinking. Otherwise, we wouldn't be asking those questions. But I'm not sure Superintendent has anything to add.
No, well, okay, maybe just to say that what we're hearing aligns with our thinking. We too are challenged by getting EAs in the classroom because we have a shortage. So I don't know if we can fix that in a budget process, but we're concerned about many of the things the public is concerned about as well.
Right. Thank you. That was a question from Trustee Keller. Do you have a follow-up, Trustee Keller?
Yes, thank you very much. It's just, anytime we do public engagement and we ask the public for feedback, we have to give consideration to what we're going to do and how we're going to report back what we're going to do to the public. So my curiosity in asking the question was because we've asked for this feedback on our budget and what's important. How are we going to use that information going forward? So I'm hoping that as we go through into budget proposals, there will be a way for staff to be able to share how this input and the other input that we receive from our students and other stakeholders makes its way into the proposals.
Okay. I think we can make that notation for the budget process and see those considerations reflected at that time. Thank you. And so we did have a couple of questions from trustees. Dale, if you could please email the board a copy of the heat map that you referenced in your presentation, that would be greatly appreciated.
For sure, yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I am going to move on the budget. We only have a couple of 4 minutes past 9. It's been a long day. Thank you everybody for your patience. It's definitely been a big agenda for us to get through. So we have no unfinished business, no new business. There is attached to the agenda information under vandalism and board motions report. Were there any questions around those items? Seeing none. Everybody could just give me 1 second to set myself up. We did receive a question from our audience this evening. So just give me a moment and I'll get the question prepared. So our question this evening is from Jeremy Anishko. And the question is, the new AP does not seem to address removal of resources. Is that an oversight, intentional, or addressed somewhere else? Point 3 in the general guidelines appears to suggest that teachers cannot select their own resources without having them approved through someone else. This seems cumbersome and fails to recognize teachers' professionalism to select resources that address their students' differentiated needs. Can teachers still select their own resources based on these criteria, or do all resources need to be approved by a recognized source? Okay. So we've had such a long meeting that I've been able to be provided with a fairly detailed response. So I'll provide that response, and then if there's any follow-up, I would ask that Mr. Anishko email me, and I can follow up directly with him on any follow-up questions that he may have. So with regard to the removal of resources, this is addressed in the SD 68 requirements section on pages 4 and 5 of the revised AP, which outlines BC ratings from the Consumer Protection BC guidelines. Resource removal should be based on application of this criteria and ensuring age-relevant, appropriate selection. Further to that, the SD 68 requirements section refers to the use of streaming services, commercial feature film videos, and audio files. However, for the selection of print resources, falls under the selection criteria on pages 2 and 3. Thorough review and appraisal of the 4 criteria and adjacent considerations that those selecting resources are expected to consider. Resources that do not meet this criteria should not be used in NLPS as a publicly accountable organization. The next point is around the general guidelines around selecting resources. Selection of resources involves many people, including teachers. Purchases of school-based and district-level resources rests with district staff, principals, and professional staff, including teachers. Point 3 specifically outlines learning leaders, formerly department heads, teacher librarians, district Indigenous teachers, inclusion teachers, and subject area specialists, teachers, or recognized professional associations. Teachers are directly involved in the selection of learning, resources. Excuse me. Regarding selecting their own resources on the criteria, learning resources purchased by the district and schools must be vetted through the criteria as set forth in the revised AP 223. These selections adhere to the learning standards of provincial curriculum and focused education, formerly ERAC. As a provincial public school organization, NLPS remains accountable to the public to ensure the use of appropriate recognized provincial standards for selection of learning and curriculum resources. This has not changed. And so I would just ask Mr. Anishko, if you have any further questions, to please email me and I can follow up with you directly on those, and we would post any follow-up questions and answers to our website, which is our typical practice. So that was our only question for the evening. Just to find my correct piece of paper and the correct mouse, because I'm working from 2 computers. Let's see here. Okay, so that concludes our question period for the evening. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn, if someone could move that. Trustee Bergevich, motion that we adjourn, seconded by Trustee Stanley. Although I suppose my question is, any objections? Seeing none, we'll move to an adjournment.
Thank you. Well done, Mark.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Good job, everyone.
Thank you to our staff. You guys have done an absolutely